Good evening. This is Maestro Cotella with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite podcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Calderis Refinery, and our first player today is Cyris. Cyris is playing as the Grey Knight Row Captain, this one rather blue. He has a flaming sword on the back of his cape. Tanky melee hero. He can tie things up. He has a speed of 4, making him the slowest hero in the game by default. However, he also has that We Are the Hammer speed buff, and he also has great abilities like Canticle Encapsulation. His opponent is Sexy Marine David, playing as the Commissar Lord. Slightly tanky melee hero, does come with a free energy shield, although it has a poor conversion ratio compared to other energy shields. And he does, of course, have his execution buffs, or debuff in the case of Inspire Terror, which can be modified by his armor choices. So, Grey Knights versus Imperial Guard on Calderis Refinery. This is a matchup that I'm not terribly familiar with, because it is a matchup that, as far as I know, does not really happen that often, so chances are hardly anyone is terribly familiar with it. I mean, even to the extent that they play it in teams, this matchup probably rarely takes place in 1v1. Grey Knights generally considered not a terribly strong 1v1 race. But they have people have been saying that for a while. Grey Knights have gotten some buffs lately, although at the same time they still have some outstanding weaknesses. And when I say outstanding, I don't mean outstanding as in really good. I mean as in are still standing out as being an issue. The main outstanding weakness, like kind of their vulnerability to tanks, in part because of the way their AV is currently. And we see opening builds from our players. We see triple Stormtroopers, triple Inquisitorial Stormtroopers from Cyris, giving him a lot of range firepower to start out, and he also has an extra squad compared to David, so he would at least potentially have more map control. And in fact, I think Cyris could even afford to break up his units, maybe have one that's not even fighting right now, since he doesn't really need that much, and have it go capture these side power nodes, perhaps. Looks like he's now kind of splitting up and capturing. I actually think it would be a good idea to maybe keep 1 or even 2 over here by this power farm to start pressuring the generators. He would definitely, I think he would have the time to maybe get 1 generator down, which I think is not a bad idea. Nevertheless, Cyris almost has the entire map. He basically has almost everything. Well, he's at least, if he doesn't have parts of the map, he's at least denied it to David, because David literally has no points on the map captured except for his natural power node.
The enemy is capturing one of our victory points.
So Cyris went with that heavy ranged opening, buying cheap range units, cheap, weak range units, but it gives him a lot of range firepower just because he has so many units. That allows him to support his brother captain quite a bit, and it also gives him, I think, a bit of an edge over David, who only had 2 ranged units. He now does have Catachan Devils. It is actually somewhat surprising to not see him get a Sentinel. I feel like Sentinels can be pretty strong in this matchup, or at least against the Imperial Guard. Right there we had an old reliable, disrupting and damaging 3 Inquisitorial Stormtrooper squads, so I think Cyris needs to split them up a little bit more. And since these Stormtroopers are actually so squishy, they actually will take pretty significant damage from that old reliable grenade barrage. I think right here we had the Catachan Devils retreat. That was probably an accidental retreat, probably meant to retreat that nearly dead guardsman squad instead. But yeah, I would normally expect to see Catachan Devils against the Grey Knights. I mean, not Catachan Devils, yeah, they're good too, but I would expect to see Sentinels against the Grey Knights, in part because we have these Stormtroopers, and they would be able to pressure the Sentinel a bit, but at the same time, because of how weak these Stormtroopers are, they're also going to bleed a lot and quickly lose field presence from the Sentinel. At the same time, the Sentinel is often one of the best answers to the Purgation squad Incinerator Flamers, and that's also something that most of the Guardsman infantry squads will struggle with quite a bit, because they will take area of effect damage. It will very quickly bleed models from Guardsman squads as well as Catachan Devils, force them off the field, as well as suppressing them. And then even for something like the Commissar Lord, which doesn't get damaged that much by a Purgation squad, the Commissar Lord can definitely get suppressed before he can get into to actually tie up a Purgation squad. So that's a good thing about using a Sentinel in this matchup, both that as a single entity, it's not that bothered that much by the damage of the Purgation squad. It also can't be suppressed, and it outranges the Purgation squad. So a little surprising to not see a Purgation. Instead, we see a triple Guardsman build, which I'm a little concerned about this. Fortunately, the Catachan Devils are doing quite well against the Interceptors. The Interceptors actually pretty much getting forced off here. I don't think that they have lost one model. And we have this whole blob of Inquisitorial Stormtroopers. Now they have all been upgraded to have their Sergeants. And that Sergeant is quite a bit tougher than the standard Inquisitorial Stormtrooper model. He actually has 250 health instead of just 100, which is quite a difference. Does also allow the squad to detect for whatever that's worth. Right now that's actually not important, although it could be useful for when you might have to deal with, say, Commissar airdrop mines. But it's now David who's the one winning the engagement and taking most of the map. In fact, he's forced just about every single one of Cyris's units off the field. He's retreating his Catachan Devils again, which I don't know why he's doing that. My guess is that he's doing that to have them ready at full health for the next engagement. And there are certainly merits to that. I feel he could use his Catachan Devils to either bash the Cyris's natural power farm, or even to bash and capture this power node over here. Commissar Lord, meanwhile, has been upgraded to the Power Sword, which seems like a curious purchase. The Power Sword does give you the lead by example ability for your Commissar Lord. Functions a bit like the Battle Cry ability from the Force Commander, in that allows the Commissar to do special attacks with every strike. Where it differs from Battle Cry, it does not give you a buff to your units, a damage buff to your units, but it also increases the Commissar's speed, I believe, by 2. So it can also be used in ways that Battlecry is not used, such as allowing the Commissar Lord to run in very quickly to tie units up, particularly if it's some kind of, especially something like a Devastator Marine squad that would otherwise be suppressing your army. You can actually disrupt it with Old Reliable, and then you can run the Commissar in with Lead by Example, and you can tie that up, and that takes care of the Devastator, and then prevents the rest of your army from getting suppressed and allows them to fight against the rest of your opponent's army. In this case, he could actually use that in the sense that I just said against a Purgation squad if Cyris had one. Right now he can use Lead by Example as a way of countering the Interceptors, activate the ability as long as the Bro Captain does not have Canticle of Absolution active, which right now he doesn't even have the Warrior for that. And then he can actually just disrupt the Interceptors. Here we see a Prometheum Strike. That was definitely coming from Cyris, because the Commissar does not have access to a Prometheum Strike. Only the Inquisitor does. Kind of forcing those Guardsmen off, winning Cyris this engagement. And yeah, at this point, David needs to be concerned about getting his Commissar out of there so that he doesn't lose the Commissar entirely. So David now going for a Chimera, not a bad choice considering first of all, considering the build that Cyris has gotten, as well as just the Grey Knights in general and their relative vulnerability to vehicles based on their relatively insufficient AV. Especially with Cyris's build. You know, normally a lot of players will get they will get a Purgation squad, or they will at least get a Strike squad. You can upgrade the Purgation squad to Side Cannons, and that's your AV. You can upgrade your Strike squad to Side Cannons, and even though that's definitely not sufficient AV, you can at least scare them, and just because by threatening them with by actually having some kind of AV instead of having none at all, which really is a big difference. Even if you have some AV, even if your AV sucks, there's such a huge difference between having crappy AV and having no AV whatsoever. So the Chimera is almost here. This will give David a lot of field presence. It will also, again, allow him to bleed a lot of these Stormtrooper models while not taking a lot of bleed himself. And it's also, again, something that the Interceptors will be able to use their crack grenade to snare and damage the vehicle once, but right now there's no follow-up to that. Cyris is getting something that he can use to follow up. He is getting a Grey Knight Dreadnought, which does start out with a multi-melta. So David is taking the map back, but once that Dreadnought comes out, he's going to have to be a little bit more careful with his Chimera. We do see the crack grenade upgrading, or grenades in general, because they get a crack grenade. I believe they get also psych-out grenades. So, but David in particular needs to be careful about the crack grenade. Of course, because the combination of the crack grenade and then a follow-up from the Dreadnought would take out his Chimera pretty much in a single engagement. And in fact, as much as I said this Chimera was a good choice, right now David is in somewhat of a precarious position because there is some combination of either he can't allow his Chimera to get snared, or he needs the Dreadnought somehow just not around when that grenade goes off. Like here, this could actually be a dead Chimera for David. He might just have it far enough. He'll need to take all of his guardsmen out and start repairing. Like, he really needs to start repairing. Flare is a pretty good idea to reduce the range, and actually the effect of the crack grenade has already worn off before the Grey Knight Dreadnought could even get in. So he was actually able to just keep driving out of there. I think once he saw the Grey Knight Dreadnought, he was already just driving away as quickly as he could. I was going to say he should take some guardsmen out, but they weren't actually in the Chimera to repair. He did have this guardsman squad right here, which, by the way, is actually only running around with 6 models. He has not gotten a sergeant upgrade on this one. So that's interesting. And I mean, part of that could be that right now he's not really using this even as a combat guardsman squad. Like, he's not even really fighting with this guardsman squad. He's mainly using these 2 squads to fight with, which he does have with sergeants. And then this one is kind of like his map control squad. He's running it around. It's more utility and map control, and it only fights if like they really need to. But the sergeant upgrade is cheap. At only 85 requisition, I feel like he could just get the sergeant upgrade on that squad anyway, and I think they would benefit quite a bit. Now, already we see some stormtroopers. They have infiltrated, and they already have been upgraded to the anti-armor kit, so we definitely have a hard answer to this Grey Knight Dreadnought, so it needs to be very, very careful. The stormtroopers have been revealed, but we also have some guardsmen that have been executed with Inspire Determination from the Commissar Lord. This kind of buffs his execute ability. It gives them defensive benefits, basically gives them like defense bonus, as well as increasing the speed of the unit that gets executed. And one of the great things that David is doing here, which is really kind of the mark of someone who knows his hero and kind of knows what he's doing with his race, is that he's combining it in a way that really mitigates the risk and the weaknesses of something that he's trying to use. He's trying to use this Bionic Eye, a very, very powerful ability. The risk and the weakness of it is that your units can't retreat. So if they can't retreat, if he uses that at a bad time, he can lose an entire squad. So what he's doing to mitigate that risk is that he's combining it with the Chimera. The Chimera can reinforce his units as they're getting killed. He can reinforce the models that he's losing on Catachan Devils or any squad that he uses Bionic Eye on, or Inspired Determination. And if things get really hairy, he can also just put them inside the Chimera to protect them. So that's a very good synergy that really, again, just mitigates the risk that's very inherent in using the Commissar's suite of execute abilities. Right there we see Inspired Determination again, which is, again, something that could be very, very dangerous. It's actually being really, really devastating to those Interceptors. He actually kills the Interceptor Justicar. He might even kill the whole Interceptor squad, but I think Cyris did very, very well there to disrupt these Catachan Devils to prevent them from finishing off that Interceptor squad. Might have been able to finish them off with an old reliable, but he still hurt Cyris really, really hard there. He killed the Justicar on the Interceptor, killed an additional 2 models, took out the Bro Captain, and took out the Grey Knight Dreadnought. So huge win all around for David. Cyris somehow, nevertheless, in Tier 3. I think part of that has had to do with the fact that David has been winning engagements, but he also has been neglecting these side power nodes. So that's been giving Cyris a power advantage. So he's definitely had a power advantage that has, I think, been allowing him to tech a bit more. We also see these Catachan Devils using a lot of their abilities. We saw the smoke grenade going right there to kind of reduce the damage that they would take. And now David is actually in a very strong position with this Chimera, because Cyris is again in a position where he doesn't have much that he can use to counter this Chimera. And I actually think David needs to, if anything, press his advantage a little bit harder. Try to get the full bash off here while he had the opportunity. I think maybe he was just kind of scared that he would have to worry about some kind of vehicle, and of course, or some kind of actual answer to his. Oh, and could actually be really bad. This could be a dead Catachan Devils, and he actually loses the Catachan Devils, unfortunately. But, I mean, this Chimera is still relatively uncountered. I feel like he could have gotten more of a generator bash off. As it is, David might also lose the Stormtroopers, the anti-armor Stormtroopers. Now, while I was talking about a bunch of things, I did neglect to mention that the Commissar has been upgraded to the Xenos Power Claw. That is, of course, just a model replacement for the Tier 2 Power Fist that he has always had. It functions exactly the same, but it looks quite a bit different and quite a bit more beastly. No ability, but you still get that 85 or 84.62 heavy melee DPS in Tier 2. As early as soon as you get to Tier 2, you can upgrade to it, which is quite a powerful asset. And that was also something that he did use to take out that Grey Knight Dreadnought. You can also use it even to bash the generators. Actually choosing to decapture, not a bad idea actually. I mean, he can decap the point, and then that will require Cyris to spend the time to recapture it. Unfortunately, he does not get to finish that decap because he does need to get that Commissar out of there before he gets killed entirely. Do not want to lose your hero. Apparently, Cyris even lost one of his Inquisitorial Stormtrooper squads, and I neglected to mention that he's been rocking some grenade launchers on these for a while, in fact. That could even be a signal for David could get maybe like O-Rins, since he won't have to worry about plasma guns on these Stormtroopers. But David also might need to consider that he is in Tier 2. He's still in Tier 2. He may not know that Cyris is in Tier 3, but he just has to anticipate that possibility. He's still in Tier 2. I don't know if he wants to go to Tier 3. And if he does want to go to Tier 3, what he should really do is start putting down some generators. Because if we look at the income, Sexy Marine David is only at plus 24 power. He has a surplus of requisition, and he doesn't have too many generators. He can put generators down right here, and he's doing that right now. He's only choosing to put down one. I say he could put down more. Because that requisition in the bank really isn't going to do much for him. Because, like, what is it going to do? Like, decide just to get, like, a new Guardsman squad or a new Stormtrooper squad? And that could have some potential benefits. But right now, I think he should be more concerned with, I think, getting to Tier 3. I think he would want to get to Tier 3 in this matchup. Interceptors are doing nothing. In part because if he does have to deal with something like these Paladins that are coming out, he might want something like Castrons. And those Castrons actually would be quite a bit better than Stormtroopers because of the fact that they can upgrade to a plasma weapon. Now, David at this point, he does not appear to have plasma guns on any of his guardsmen. And it's interesting that he's been going without that. I mean, really, the only squad that would have that increased vulnerability to the plasma would be the Interceptors. But now that these Paladins are out on the field, I think he really should get plasma guns, which it's a tough call, especially considering I'm saying he should also get to Tier 3. He did put down another generator. I don't see why he doesn't just fill this power farm up. And he has actually captured some side power nodes as well. So David actually does have a nice power income. I feel like he could still put a generator down right here, because I think there are things he needs, despite the fact that he's overall been winning. He is at a 2-to-1 cap with a VP lead of 223 to 95, but I think he still really needs to be careful about. Basically, right now there's not a whole lot to deal with these paladins. Right now, his best source of damage against the paladins are the stormtroopers, but he does have to be very careful with those stormtroopers being very close range with their meltaguns. Other than that, right now his guardsmen are not going to be doing, going to be doing very, very little to these paladins. Very, very little, believe it or not. Since those guardsmen, I believe it's been so long since I checked stats, and I used to be such a number person, but I believe guardsmen with their sergeant do about 39 DPS piercing, which is not great. It really isn't great. And Imperial Guard, I think they just kind of get a lot out of their staying power, having more squads sometimes, especially if you do a triple guardsman build, which David has, although he still does not even have the sergeant for this one. And then, of course, they get a lot out of having the plasma guns in Tier 2. Which you can especially use against races like Space Marines or even Grey Knights. But, I mean, especially now, because we said that the guardsmen with the sergeant, they do about 39 DPS piercing. Piercing has a 70% damage penalty against the super heavy infantry armor of these paladins. So if we try to do the math, which is not easy, do 39. So the damage that they're going to be doing against the paladins is actually something like 12 DPS. Which, I mean, considering the high health pool they have, there really just isn't a whole lot to do with these paladins. Paladins have also been upgraded to have a psi cannon, and these paladins could also probably walk into base and actually just go after the Chimera. They can chase after it with the psi cannon. They could just straight up go for it. The main thing they have to worry about is the stormtroopers. So the stormtroopers will be doing bonus damage, but at the same time, David is also just backed up into his base. Because he could not really deal with the paladins. The paladins are just walking over the mines. We are going to have a dead bro captain, though, who was definitely overextended, and we now have some upgrades on the bro captain, but he goes down. Does have the Nemesis warding staff as well as the Mantic of Terra, giving him the Canticle of Absolution ability. And it's now actually a 2-to-1 cap for Cyris, so he's putting himself back in this game. 2-to-1 cap, has most of the resources. David now does have a full power farm, and he's actually chosen to get a Leman Russ, which is not a bad choice considering the things I've said about basically Grey Knights and how they struggle with vehicles as well as in particular tanks. Tanks in particular because of the way tanks work, where they have long range and they're also very mobile, especially since most Grey Knight AV, in addition to not always hitting hard enough, commonalities for Grey Knight AV is that a lot of them don't have very much range. So not a lot of range out of the Grey Knight AV, as well as not a lot of mobility. Since their primary sources of AV, the Grey Knights, are first of all the Grey Knight Dreadnought with no upgrade with the Melta, which is short range. Very short range and also very slow moving. We also have the Paladins, yet again, short range and slow moving. Even if you upgrade to that psi cannon, not going to have the range of a tank. And then, of course, you do have the Purgation Squad, which they are... I believe they have the standard range, but that's still less range than a tank. And they also need to... They can't fire on the move, so they need to stop in order to fire. So they aren't very mobile, and they're going to have trouble with a mobile vehicle like a tank. But this could actually be very, very bad for the tank. And something that has been improved is now that the Interceptor Crack Grenade is very, very reliable, it can actually be very well used in combination with something like Paladin. So now we actually see that tank taken out. So as much as I was talking about how much trouble the Grey Knights should have with a tank, and and how bad their AV is. Cyris managed to make it work, and he's coming back in this game. It's actually a 1-to-1 cap. He doesn't have too many VPs left, but he took out a Lehman Russ. Basically, that's one of the big improvements that the Interceptors have had. Their crack grenade was changed to function more like an ASM Melta rather than a regular grenade. So it just homes in on the vehicle, and he was actually able to just snare that tank, and then the Paladins were able to follow it up. So that is one of the things that has been improved, but I think Grey Knights are still somewhat suffering by not having something like a Las Cannon Devastator or a Bright Lance. Something really long range. Cyris, nevertheless, doing very well. He is a very solid player. David himself is someone who is pretty solid, and we have an orbital bombardment. So this is but it's still a 2-to-1 cap for David because he went for the back cap. Oh, didn't even realize that. So Cyris is actually running out of time. He needs to get another cap off. He's going back to his natural. I don't know if he'll have enough time to get that point. Actually, he will be able to at least stop it out. Terminator's doing nothing. Oh no, Terminators are actually very low on health. And by Terminators, I do, of course, mean Paladins, and they are Terminators. And he's managing to, he's keeping these Paladins in here, and David is actually managing to deal with them, and without plasma guns. And I think he's doing it a lot just on the staying power of his, guardsmen with the Chimera. I guess also with the Commissar, with that heavy melee power fist, and actually using Inspired Determination. So he actually kills the Paladins. So pretty amazing, and I unfortunately I hate it when these people are playing the game, and I'm trying to say all these things, and in a way they're proving me wrong, and in a way they're not proving me wrong. Basically they're actually just getting by without all the things that I'm saying. Ooh, Stormtroopers go down. But I guess just part of what I think that in terms of is just optimization. It's like what are the absolute best things that you need to deal with something? And ideally, if you want to deal with Paladins, you need some kind of plasma damage. But David managed to get away without having any kind of plasma damage. And basically, he could still damage the Paladins. He just didn't have the things that he could use to do the most damage to Paladins. And Cyris is desperately going for this capture point right here, trying to use ward on his nearly dead Stormtroopers. But unfortunately, right now, it really looks like this game is going to go in favor of David. It actually looked like Cyris was putting himself back in the game, but then David was doing all that backcapping, and then he took out the Paladins. You dare? And Cyris now calling a GG because David gets that cap, the 2-to-1. And it's ticking down, and Cyris will not be able to get those VPs back in time.
We have failed.
Alright. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.